welcome to Securing Your APIs with Brightsec. And so I'm Tanya. Actually, I think I have a slide all about that. So this is the workshop. So I wanted to be clear that this is not just a talk, this is interactive. So there's going to be a bunch of stuff for all of you to do. So what are we going to talk about today besides a really cute puppy? So APIs rule the web, but they're being attacked. And this is the problem that we're hoping that we can solve. The top 10 API security best practices. So in another talk I just did and so I've incorporated some of those best practices into this talk so that not only do you know how to scan with a dynamic scanner, but you actually know a whole bunch of other things to prevent vulnerabilities from happening in the first place. Then we're going to set up the workshop. We're going to scan some stuff. We're going to find vulnerabilities and talk about what we found. Then at the end of this, there'll be a link to a PDF of all the best practices we did. And then there's going to be a bunch of other resources where you can learn more. And so if you have questions at any point, you can put them in the Q&A. I see that we can't put things in the chat, and that's so next. So this is me. I'm Tanya. This is the mandatory about me slide. You can see I brushed my hair there. So I'm the Director of Developer Relations and Community at Brightsec. I'm the CEO and founder Purple, which is the community that supports Bright. So if you hear of We Hack Purple, we're probably talking about some Bright stuff or some AppSec. I'm also known as She Hacks Purple on the internet, and yes, I really like purple. I wrote a book. It's called Alice and Bob Learn Application Security. I'm an advisor at a couple of cybersecurity companies. I've worked in tech a long time, and I am essentially a nerd at large on the internet. And so with that, that's me, and that's probably about enough about me. Okay, so why are you here today? So I wanted to ask very briefly, and I was hoping you could put answers in the question and answer area since the chat isn't working. So who are you? So are you a software developer creating an API? Are you an AppSec person who's in charge of testing? Are you a quality assurance person, a project manager? Are you a student who wants to learn more? So if you could put some of your answers into the Q&A section, I could read them out for everyone so that we could see. And if Ollie or Akira could clear out some of the previous answers from the Q&A, that would be helpful because there's like quite a few that are still in there from before saying that the chat is disabled. That would be helpful. But basically, who are you and what are you doing? Okay, so we have, let's see. So we have an AppSec person, we have a software engineer, we have another AppSec person, QA student, quality assurance, information security analyst, responsible for AppSec, software developer, creating, yes, program manager for Red Team. Oh, Scott, you're going to cause trouble, aren't you? Web developer, AppSec engineer, software architect, VP of engineering, principal engineer, software engineer, AppSec person, student seeking to learn more, cybersecurity specialist, backend developer and security analyst, junior cybersec analyst, dev operations team, software developer, security engineer, risk management, software developer. I know I'm saying a lot, but I'm not sure if everyone is able to see this on the screen, so I want to make sure you all hear. QA, security specialist, InfoSec manager, junior penetration tester, IT manager, API automation. Nice. Okay, so we have so many. Thank you. API developer, InfoSec analyst, InfoSec manager. I believe we can only see our own questions, so thanks for reading them out loud. Oh, thank you so much for letting me know that, Scott. Also, I hope you're having a great day, Scott. Okay, so I'm going to close this. So let's start the workshop now that I have an idea that we have a lot of people that work in information security, a ton of them that concentrate on AppSec, and then we have a bunch of software developers, quality assurance analysts, and people just want to make sure that the software developers have what they need in order to make secure software. So this is excellent. You guys are great. Okay, so let's do this. So there we go. I like to have like a lot of positive imagery, like high fives and stuff. So let's continue. Okay, so first of all, I need to come clean a bit. It's not, so I said there was like a top 10 list, but there's actually way more than 10 tips that I'm going to give you. And the reason that I do this is because top 10 sounds really cool, but I had more tips and I didn't want to not tell you the best practices because that seemed like a bad idea. So I believe I put sorry, not sorry, because I think giving you more information is probably okay. So let's start. So first of all, the problem that we are trying to solve today. So APIs still need just as much security attention as web applications. Not having a front end doesn't make them invisible to attackers. So years ago, when I was a pen tester, very briefly, like a year and a half, I remember going to a meeting with a whole bunch of people to set out the scope, and they were just trying to decide, do we want to hire her? Do we want to hire someone else? I don't know. And there were two devs there. And I was supposed to test a mobile app. And so I said, hey, I have made a list of all of your APIs that connect to your mobile app. And I'm wondering if you could tell me if they're all in scope. I'd also like to know, did I miss any? Because I didn't do, because I don't have the contract yet, I didn't do a super thorough job. And I also didn't want to do anything but passive scanning. And so basically I made this big list of all their APIs that the mobile app was calling, and the two devs looked at each other and like, how did you see those? And I said, they're right there. I just proxied your mobile app, and then I could see all the things connecting, and I want to make sure that I test everything thoroughly, so I made a list, but if there's something you don't want me to test, I need to know. And they looked at each other, and they're like, you better hire her. And I was like, yes, I passed. This is great. I see there's a lot of things in the chat, which means we just got the chat to work. Awesome, great work, everyone. Okay, thank you, Akira and Ollie, for fixing that. Okay, so the problem. Web apps are still the #1 cause of data breach, according to the Verizon breach report. So I'm one of those nerds that reads most of it every year. And unfortunately, we have been #1 as long as I've been reading it, and I've been reading it since 2015. And web apps are really just front ends for APIs at this point. A lot of us are using a microservice architecture, which is awesome, but we have to not only secure the GUI, the beautiful front end, but we also have to secure all the back end stuff. And that means APIs. And so most apps right now are just a bunch of APIs with a GUI in front, and so we have to protect the whole thing, not just the front or the pretty part that most people see. Okay, so let's go through the list. So the first thing on the list is create a complete inventory of all your APIs. So this can be a bit hard. There's a couple products on the market that that say they can do this now. I haven't got to test them out to see if they actually find all of them. That said, the first thing you want to do if you are an AppSec person or a cybersecurity person in charge of securing all of your web assets is you need an inventory. So that's your web apps, but it's also all of your APIs. And even, like, quite frankly, stuff like SaaS products, someone in the cybersecurity team needs to take a look at those as well. And so for that, oh, there's new messages. Okay. Great. Everything's fine with the chat. So basically, if you don't have a full inventory list, what happens is that you can't make sure they're all secure. That might sound really odd, but if you don't know about something and it's not on your list, that means you're probably not doing security tests on it. It means you're probably not doing a secure code review. It means it might not be monitored by any of your monitoring tools. It means that if there's a security incident, that's going to be your incident responder's first day of work for the whole year. I remember this happening to me, and someone came and they said, oh, this app's getting attacked. And I didn't know what it was. It was not on my list. I didn't know who was in charge of it. I didn't know where the code was. I didn't even have a link at the start of the incident. And I was just like, this is going to be a really bad day. And so when you have an inventory, then you can make sure that all of them receive security attention, that they follow your system development lifecycle. You can make sure that you have all the monitoring and alerting and anything else that you might have. You can make sure they're tested regularly, etc. And so if you just take one thing away from this top 10 list, and it's that, please do inventory. Okay, so basically, I believe that if you have an API and it's on the internet, it should be behind an API gateway. So a gateway can do many things, but the main two things that it does is it blocks anyone from connecting to your API unless you go through their gate. And their gate requires authentication and authorization. So who are you? And should you even be here? And it's important that we have this because of a bunch of reasons. One, to make sure that we aren't constantly having our APIs brute forced, because people will try to get in. Bots, they find an API, it's not protected by a gateway, and they just start digging away at it over and over. And what this can result in is, first of all, someone getting in that should not be in, but second of all, really big cloud bills that you weren't expecting. And that's really less than ideal. So it's quite important that if you're going to have an API that is exposed to the internet, that it goes behind a gateway. And gateways can do more things, which we'll talk about in some further slides. Some companies use a gateway even if it's not behind like a firewall and inside, on your intranet instead of the internet. And that's okay. It depends on what your risk level is inside of your network. So let's go on from here. So throttling and resource quotas. So this is the third thing. And the reason why it is important, so APIs get attacked by bots a lot, and gateways are a way to block out the bots. But the bots themselves will still try to connect to the API gateway all the time and be very annoying. And so what throttling means, and both of these are features within an API gateway product, but throttling means slowing things down if someone keeps asking. And so it's like, I'm not going to let you ask 50 times per minute if you can log into this thing. It's like, I'm on to you. I can tell you're a bot or some sort of automated process trying to get in. So you start slowing them down. And then resource quotas, what they do is they wait until you've reached a certain number and then they just cut you off. So you've tried to log in 12 times in the past hour. You have to wait another hour, or you have to wait 24 hours, or you have to call help desk to unlock this. And basically it locks them right out. And it's really good. So I'm hoping that some of you will turn that on. There's a question. Would you make resource quotas and such part of a production readiness checklist of sorts? Lewis, that's such a fantastic question. Yeah, absolutely. I'd say that resource quotas as the bare minimum, and then throttling is nice on top of that. So you have two ways to slow them down, because sometimes bots will realize, hey, if I just ask once per hour, I can get past this throttling. But meanwhile, if you don't have a resource quota, they'll just ask indefinitely. And so it can help you keep track of that sort of thing. And I personally really like to make a checklist or a list of security requirements for all new projects. So you're making an API, that's awesome. Here's a list of the things that I need from you. I need you to put it behind our API gateway. You need to turn on throttling and resource quotas. You have to add it to our API inventory and all the other things we're going to talk about. And then the devs know exactly what you want from them. And then they can make it for you, which I find really, really helpful. Okay, next. Logging, monitoring, and alerting. So if you have a great big web app, people generally do logging and monitoring on it, and some of them will do alerting on it. But for some reason, when we have an API, people are like, I don't need to do that anymore. It's just a little baby API. It doesn't matter. And then bad things happen to the API and no one notices until bad things have been happening a really long time. Or you get a cloud bill that is ginormous and you're like, oh no, this is the worst. And so it's really quite important that you at least have it log and monitor. Alerting depends on you. So for instance, if you're a company and you're using Splunk, you can have your logs go into Splunk if you want to. And I've seen that work quite well. I've seen software development teams that own Splunk and they use it for quality, and they just want to know if their app is down because it's really important to look good in front of their clients. And so not only can monitoring and logging help you have just higher quality and more reliability for your customers and your clients or whoever it is that's using your product, so it could even be citizens, but alerting can help you catch when an emergency is happening rather than afterwards. And so I personally am a big fan of both. There's a comment in the chat from Pierre. I agree with Ivan. This is a fantastic and very thoughtful in touching what issues are encountered in API security. It is increasingly part of delivering customer experience. Oh, thank you. Awesome. Okay, up next. Oh, and we want to do the same as we would for a web app. I know APIs are smaller, though their logs will be very tiny. It's not that much monitoring compared to a web app, but if our APIs are being attacked, we want to know. Okay, so the next one, and this applies to web apps as well, but for some reason it gets forgotten the most on APIs, is blocking unused HTTP methods. Sometimes casually we'll call them HTTP verbs, but basically most web apps just use get and post. They use get and post all day long, but there's actually a whole bunch of them. And so APIs will often use get, post, delete, and update. And that's awesome. But if they're not using other ones, we should just disable those. So if you have a virtual machine, especially if it's on-prem and it's old, there's a pretty decent chance that it is, how do I word this nicely? That someone could be calling those methods that you're not aware of. So basically, someone watches the API getting called, there's a request and a response, and let's say the request is a get. So if you are a pen tester, the next thing you want to do is use something like Postman or some sort of proxy, and then you send it a request with, instead of a get, you use trace, you use head, you use all these other things that the API is not expecting. And sometimes it will respond with an answer, or sometimes it will let you do something you shouldn't do. So for instance, let's say it deletes records by using the delete method. Well, maybe you could actually get to delete records by using update or get or post. And then maybe a bunch of the logic in your app doesn't apply because it only applies to the delete. And I mention this because I used to do a hacking APIs workshop with my friend Nicole Becker, and that's exactly what we did. We would just use all these other methods that the app didn't have defenses for, and they were still turned on so we could do whatever we want. So if you're using containers or virtual machines, disable all the ones you're not using, because then you're reducing your attack surface of your APIs. Okay, so use a service mesh for communication management. So if you are, how do I word this? If you have 2 APIs, you don't need a service mesh, you're cool. But if you have hundreds or thousands of calls per hour, TCP/IP didn't mean to have that many calls. Like when all this was invented, I don't know if you remember BBS, like bulletin board spaces, and it was just static web pages that didn't do anything. And then we created sessions and logins and all this amazing stuff. And as it became more complex, TCP/IP wasn't really updated very much. A lot of us still run IPv4. And the point is that if you have so many microservices sending so many messages all the time, some of them start banging into each other. Some of them start going a lot slower. And what a service mesh will do is it will manage all that communication for you. It will make it much faster, and it encrypts it end to end. And so that's like an added plus of just encrypting everything for you. And what this means is that you have better reliability, and like as security folks, that means better availability. And for us, that's a huge check mark in the right direction. And so a service mesh will make things faster. It will manage things to make sure that things get to where they're going. And you don't actually have to change any code, which is excellent. So it's just a layer of infrastructure. And the devs might think, oh no, we have to make all these code changes, but you don't really. And so that's really nice. There is something in the chat. Oh, my voice is cutting up again. Can you please describe what a service mesh is? Yes. So Max, a service mesh is a layer of infrastructure. And what the layer of infrastructure does is it encrypts all of the API calls from end to end. It manages them to ensure that it is, first of all, that every single call is arriving that should. It makes sure that none of them are banging into each other. And it makes sure there's less latency, because the latency means things slowing down. And if you just have tons and tons of calls all the time and you don't have a mesh, what happens is just it overwhelms the system and it causes problems, and it's really not good. There's another question. Is it possible to have alerts integrated with Service Mesh to have one platform of truth to know what may be happening? Pierre, I'm unaware of how you could have alerts go into the Service Mesh so that you could see it, but I do wonder if the Service Mesh itself can have alerts that go out that could be sucked up into something like Splunk or some other SIM or some other dashboard. I honestly am not really familiar with the alerts that come from a Service Mesh. I don't know how to explain it. It usually just does all the stuff that we want. And so I haven't seen a lot of alerts come out of it. Maxwell says more like a VPN. Actually, it's exactly like a VPN. It is a lot like a VPN. That's great. It's a tunnel, basically. And all the stuff just goes through there and it speeds it way up and protects it. So actually, I'm going to use that from now on, Maxwell. Thank you. Okay, so the next one is we want to implement standards for our org and then enforce them. So just like someone was saying earlier, I could make a checklist for all APIs. You can make a checklist for serverless, a checklist for web apps, etc. And so ideally, you would make a checklist for your APIs and say, I want these 5 things before you put something in prod. And that can be your standard for your org. It can be requirements that you make as part of a project. It could be, these are API security standards. You can call it whatever you want. But the most important thing is that, one, you get feedback from the software developers and potentially the operations team to make sure that you can do those things. You don't want to write something and they're like, actually, we don't own a service mesh. The budget got cut. We don't have money for that. So if you tell us we have to use a service mesh, but no one's willing to pay for a service mesh, you put us in a bad position. I've seen things like that happen. So get feedback before you put it into practice. But making standards and giving guidance is really, really helpful. Oh, I have another question. May I request you to PowerPoint slide and certificate of attendance? Please help me, I need it. Okay, so if someone, and by that I mean Akira or Ollie, could address that question in the Q&A. I do believe that there is something to say that we attended. So I'm gonna let someone else answer that. Okay, so next slide. Strict linting. So I didn't know what to put for linting. So I decided that I would put a kitty cat and then I would have a bunch of fluffy looking blankets. So what linting means is it's sort of like running a spell checker over your code. It makes sure that you're following the definition very clearly, there's no poetic license, and it makes sure that your code is complete. So for an API, you can open up the definition file and make sure that every part is complete. So let me explain. When I was a dev and I did APIs, I would do something like, oh, I want a string from the user. And so I'd be like, define string. And then I'd get it and then I would do stuff with it. But in an API, ideally what you would do is you would define more than that. So you would say in the API, so this is a string. The string should be, minimum 5 characters, maximum 200 characters. The string should contain 0 through to 9, and then A through to Z lowercase, and then A through to Z uppercase. When you end up using that API, it now has input validation, and that can be really, really helpful. And so there are API linters specifically, and the other reason that we really, really need to do strict linting is because then the dynamic scanning tools work. So years ago, when I think it was my 3rd AppSec job, maybe my 4th, I've had so many now, because it's been a long time. But I remember we just started building APIs. I was super excited. I'm like, I'm going to scan it with my dynamic scanner tool. Pew, 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 pew. And I scanned the first one and it said there was nothing wrong. And I was like, oh, okay, well, it's not very big, I guess. I scanned the second one, nothing was wrong. I talked to my teammates and they said, yeah, we've scanned all 27 of them. There's nothing wrong with any of them. And I'm like, I don't think so. I'm like, I was a dev And I thought I was pretty good, and I made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. There's no way that our team, who just started making APIs like last year, made 27 completely perfect APIs. And so what was happening is their definition file was not complete. And so, like, that was a mess, right? And so it turns out if you open it up, so you open up, it's called the schema file. It can be called the API definition file. Some people call it the Swagger file or open API definition file. But basically the place where you define your API, like the protocol, the things. And so you can open that up with Bright. There are other tools on the market that can do this, and it will walk you through your definition file and tell you all the things that are not quite right. Then you can correct them. And then the dynamic scanner will find tons of things wrong. But if you don't do that step, the dynamic scanner will look at it and say, well, it's a string. Yeah, it's a string. I don't know what to do with this. I don't know if this is okay or that's okay. I can't tell if this is bad or not. And it can't test it properly. And so it's really important that if you are testing one of your APIs, that you put it through a schema editor. That's what Bright calls it. Some people call it an API linter. So generally, just you want to lint your API to make sure that it works properly. And Mark, strict linting only works if we have definitions for them. Yes, Mark, I agree. So there are API linters, and Brights is included for you with the Bright tool, and they call it the schema editor. If you're using another dynamic scanner, you want to make sure that they have that available to you because you want to make sure that your definition file is complete. And so if they don't have that, it might not be the best one for testing APIs. You might want to check out getting another tool to do the linting for you. It's up to you. Okay, so the next one, avoid verbose error messages. I was working somewhere, and I'm Canadian, and you probably hear my accent. You're probably, at some point I probably said aboot or something like that, where you could tell that I was Canadian. Anyway, Canadians are stereotypically extremely polite. That is a thing. And the stereotype exists for a reason. It's because most of us are. And so I was working somewhere pen testing their API, and it kept giving me really extensive error messages. It would say, we're so sorry, but that, because of course we apologize. We're so sorry, but your API call is incorrect. Please change it like this. This is the format we're expecting, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, guys, you got to know this is not okay. Ooh, lots of people from Vancouver. I'm like, you can't give me a big message telling me what I did wrong so I can correct it. Anyone that calls an API is not a person. It's a computer. It's a computer. It's not a person. Its feelings cannot be hurt. So when you give this extremely verbose error message, the only person that's going to see it is a malicious actor or your pen tester. And so we needed to say bad input, try again. Or bad input, try again. If you cannot figure this out, call us at this number. And then let's say it is a company that is genuinely supposed to interact with you. You can verify their identity, and then you can help them and make sure their call to their API is working properly. But what you're doing is giving malicious actors hints and clues. You're helping me make a way better SQL injection attack. I need you to stop that now. Yes, developers would see it. It can be very helpful for them. So Tom, during development, yes, I absolutely agree during development. But once it's in prod, you should not have verbose error messages. If it's in production and someone is seeing that error message, it's almost always a malicious actor. You shouldn't have humans that are doing that. It's not good. So yes, while you're in development, you want all the information you can to do a good job. But once it's out into prod, we must avoid verbose error messages. It's really important. Okay. So the next one, decommission old or unused versions of your API. So if you are about to release version 2, you need to make absolute sure that at the same time or right after, you turn off version 1. I've I've had some pen tester friends tell me it's maybe once a year they'll find this, but there'll be a very old version of the API still running. And they will go to call it. It's super insecure because no one's looked at it in years. It's really important you decommission the old versions. Okay, next. It is really important that you use the same secure coding practices that you normally would and follow a secure system development lifecycle just like you normally would. It's really quite, for some reason, when we start with new technologies, quite often whoever is doing the new technology, and I am the same way. Basically, I'm very excited about the new thing I'm doing. I build a thing and I want to release it because I'm excited because I made this awesome thing. However, sometimes we forget about secure coding. We forget about doing the tests we're supposed to do, or we skip steps. And so it's really important we're still just as diligent with APIs, serverless, containers, etc., as we would be for any other thing that we're doing. And I bet you're like, I know that, and that's okay, but it's a reminder. There's a comment in the chat. What about error messages like company ID missing or cannot send end date after start date? So Ivan, you can share those, but a human being should not be seeing error messages from your API unless they're in development. And so just saying bad input, because no human should ever be seeing those except while you're creating or testing them. Once it's in production, humans aren't receiving that message, right? It's some other API or some other front end or something like that that is creating that. And so, yeah, it's weird, right? Someone says, can you touch on best practices for GraphQL? That's an awesome question, but we definitely don't have time because we've been slightly delayed due to my poor internet, and I am sorry about that. We definitely don't have time to cover on extra topics right now, but that's a great question, and quite frankly, that's a great idea. I should just add that later. That's awesome. Thanks, Peter. Okay, so next slide. Okay, so this is the last one. Perform security testing on your API. I don't know why, but a lot of people skip this step. I think that it is important that we do dynamic scanning, static application security testing, software composition analysis, all the things we would do on a normal web app. I want to do all of them on an API too. And I know it might be a bit weird or a bit different, but APIs have important information in them, and I don't want it to fall into the wrong hands. And so to me, that's pretty important. Oh, my pleasure, Peter. Thank you. Okay, so what is a dynamic scanner? Because that's what we're going to do today. We're going to scan a Dast. We're going to scan an API with our dynamic scanner. So it stands for Dynamic Application Security Testing Tool. And what a Dast does is it automatically interacts with your application while it's running, and it finds vulnerabilities and tells you about them. I know that might sound kind of basic, but basically it's probably the first or the second type of security testing tool that existed for software. It's one of the originals. It's the most common one by far that is used on applications across the world because it's super easy and it finds lots of stuff. You don't need to have a copy of the source code to use a dynamic scanner. You just need a URL or an IP address, and then you can just set the Dast to automatically go and find vulnerabilities for you. It's what I started with so I was a software developer and I switched over to security, and then I became a pen tester. And yeah, my Dast was my best friend. I would use a web proxy as well so that I could do manual testing. But the beauty of a Dast is even if you don't have lots of security training, you can still find tons of things wrong. Oh, Steven's offering some extra advice. I would normally use custom error code if you need specific stuff, and also utilize your HTTP response codes. Yeah, I agree with Steven. So if you say it's error 443 or error 5001, and the HTTP response code, it's like you're getting a 404 or 403 or whatever, the dev should be able to look it up and know what to do. And a malicious actor should not have a copy of that. So that's great. Good call, Steven. Awesome. So why do we choose Dast? So I chose Dast because it's really easy. You don't need a ton of security experience. I chose Dast first, and still do, because you can just point it anywhere on the internet. And when I realized that, I was like, that means anyone can scan my website or my API with this. And I remember my mentor was like, yes, and that's why you have to fix the things, the Dast first, the Dast finds first, because anyone can find those vulnerabilities. When you run a software composition analysis tool or a SAS tool or a secret scanner, etc., that assumes access to the source code. Malicious actors generally don't have access to that unless you're an open source project. And so you want to fix the stuff from a dynamic scanner first. Like, okay, got it. So the main reasons that I choose Bright and that I decided to go work for them are, it's pretty darn fast, and that's good. I mean, it should be expected from tools, but that's fine. But the things that it does that are really cool is every time it finds a vulnerability, it has another second different test that it runs to validate the vulnerability. So I remember I used to work somewhere and we had a Dast tool, and the devs would say, these are false positives. And then the AppSec team, who had no AppSec experience, they just knew how to run the Dast. They're like, well, I pressed the validate button. And what the validate button would do is just repeat the same test. Yeah, I actually am on Rogers. I'm sorry, folks. And yes, you can have a copy of the recorded copy of this. Yes. Ivan, running a dynamic scanner on a website that is not yours is not okay. It's not legal in most countries. I know there's some countries that don't really have laws against it, but definitely you should not run a dynamic scanner on something unless you have permission, and preferably written permission. So if you work somewhere, you want to ask your boss before you run a test in production. That said, depending upon where you work, you might have access to a development server, and then it's highly likely your boss will say yes for that because there's very little risk. And so running it on something below production, like pre-prod, QA, dev, etc., it's way easier to get access and permission on that. Cool. And then in the Q&A, someone is asking, do you think Rasp, that's Runtime Application Security Protection, is the best tool for APIs? I would say no. Do I think Rasps are good? Yes. Do I think it's the best thing? Or if I only had one tool, would I choose Rasp? No. So for everyone else, what Rasp does is it's like a WAF, a web application firewall. It's a shield for your application. It's a binary you install inside your app, and it stops things that look like they might be an attack. They're supposed to be quite good, and the latency is not a big problem. Like compared to WAF, they're usually less latency. However, I would say that first, I'd rather make a really good application or web app or API that's quite tough, that I've tested a lot. And then if I needed to have a very high level of assurance that it was secure or safe, then I would do a second layer of defense and have a Rasp or a WAF. I wouldn't do it first. More questions. So do you test your APIs for security with or without WAF, or do you do both? So Praveen, I would say it depends on if you want to test your WAF or if you want to test your API. So there's a bunch of options here. You could test your API not in prod, and then there is no WAF, and you can just get straight to business. If you want to test how safe your API is behind your WAF, you would want to have a conversation, with whoever's managing your WAF so they know you're coming, etc. A lot of dynamic scanning tools, and Bright is one of them, is you can have, so some people call it whitelisting. It's usually an approved list of IP addresses, and then the web application firewall is like, oh, that guy's okay. They can send through all sorts of weird requests, but everyone else I'm blocking. And so you want to decide if you're testing your WAF or if you're testing your API and do the most effective way to test. And so it really depends on what is important to you. If you have money, do both. I mean, why not? But it's usually more about time than money. So someone is asking, so how do people find vulnerabilities and exploit them? Or do they just do it without permission and not get caught? So when people break the law, they try to hide what they're doing. And if you don't have any monitoring tools and you don't have any shielding and you don't have, all of these different tools that can try to help you know if something like that is happening, then they won't be able to see that you're doing it necessarily. Or they'll be able to stop you, but they don't have enough to be able to find who you are and try to press charges. And so ideally, we set up a system so that we can push attacks like that away. So you can say, oh, that IP address, they're not allowed touching our network at all now. That's called IP black holing. There's a lot of different options, but ideally, we should not break the law. I'd like to encourage everyone to not ever use Bright or any dynamic scanner to break the law. Okay, I have a few more things that I wanted to say about Bright. There's so many questions, and this is really awesome, but I want you to actually get to do the workshop. And we haven't even got to that part yet, so I'm worried I'm getting a little carried away. Okay, so I like Bright because there's almost no false. I like Bright because we almost never have false positives. And the reason for this specifically is because we do a test and we find a bunch of things we think are vulnerabilities, and then we do a second different test to validate it. There are some tools that have a validation button, but all they do is repeat the same test that they already did. And sometimes you need to look at things from another angle to make sure it's true. And so we have a very, 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 very low false positive rate. And that's really nice. And the other thing there's a bunch of things, but the other thing that's really cool is Bright does automated security unit testing, which Akira covers in a bunch of different workshops, and we can send you recordings of that if you want to see it. But basically, it can call the Bright scanner from unit tests and then attack those little tiny units of code for you and tell you if there's problems with it. And I find that just utterly fascinating. And it can run 100 of those at the same time, so it's really, really quick. Anyway, I think that's really neat. And so we're a bit different than the other products out there, and I like that. Okay, so we are going to test this, brokencrystals.com. This is an intentionally vulnerable site. You all have permission to test it. And that is okay, and that is great, and it's totally fantastic. And it has an API, and its API has problems. So we are going to go there in a minute. Yes, and so I'd like you to all go to that website. Yeah. Okay, John, you know what we could do is we could add that maybe to the email we send after. Good idea. Okay, so I'd like you to all go to brokencrystals.com and go to the API schema and click there. And what we want to do is we're going to just leave that open because we're going to take that URL and use it in a second. Nice. Okay, and then we want to download and save that file or just save the link, so it's up to you. Jeremy, please don't DDoS the site. Then we can't finish the workshop. But you're allowed to run dynamic scanners on the site. You are allowed. That is the way it works. Okay, so let's all go there together, and then we are going to go set up a Bright account. So I'm just going to go back. So let's all go here. So hopefully you can all see this. I'm just going to make this a bit bigger, and I'm going to close some of the questions and stuff so that you can see. So we're going to go to brokencrystals.com. Actually, I'm just going to put this in the chat so it's easy for all of you to just go there so you don't have to type it. And then we want to go here, API schema. So you can save this file or you can just save the URL. It's totally up to you what you want to do. But basically go to brokencrystals.com and then click on the API Swagger file and it should look something like this. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to go to brightsec.com and make an account. So everyone come here. So brightsec.com. My history is pretty funny. It's like, we hack purple, we hack purple, we hack purple. Does she go there sometimes? Okay, so while all of you get here, there is a question in the Q&A. Are we allowed to run Dast on any vendor-hosted APIs or SaaS ones? Legally, no, Khalid, you are not allowed to. What you have to do so let's say you have a SaaS product that you use or a vendor-hosted API, you need to write them and tell them, I would like to do security testing on your product, my company insurance, what are the rules, how do we do that, and get their permission in writing. And then they will usually want to tell you what scope you're allowed to do. And the first thing they will tell you is do not do a denial of service attack because it's just really expensive and it doesn't really test anything. It's just like, I used up all the resources, and it's like, you did. So get permission before you test anything that does not belong to you. But if you are paying for the service, they're very highly likely to say yes or provide you with a third-party report for you to review, etc. Okay, so we're going to sign up. So I already have like 4 accounts, but I'm going to show you how to sign up with an email. So if everyone could please do this with me. So click the sign up with your email button. So we are going to tell them our name. You could put your actual name. I'm going to do Tanya Janka +1 at brightsec.com. I added the +1 because I already have an account that is tanya.janka at brightsec.com. And this is a Google email address. So you can add weird, funky stuff and it goes to the same place. But basically, it's important to me that I don't have 47 Bright accounts and I get confused. So I'm going to create a password. Oh, wait. There we go. So you have to follow our funky password rules. And then you click the create a free account. So you click there and then it's going to send you a confirmation email. Can everyone please do that? In the meantime, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat and sign into my email account that I already have. And I'm going to use my password manager to get in because I have many, many passwords. Because I already did a bunch of scans earlier so that you could see what's going on. Is everyone been able to create an account? Is this working for all of you? Perfect. How do we get to the same page, please? Okay, so to go to I sent it to the panel. There we go. So go there, brightsec.com. Pierre says, I may need someone to resend the confirmation email. If you're having some issues, please point there. You may need to look in your spam. That's a really good point, Akira. Sometimes perfectly good emails go to spam. Awesome. And thank you for the great stuff in the Q&A area. I appreciate that. People sending me stuff. Okay, so take a look in your promotions. It could take a moment. Akira is on it. Hi, is this meeting being recorded? Yes, it is. So you can start from the beginning. Actually, you're at a great spot because if you just go here and make an account, you're pretty much set. You are going to have to install the Bright CLI. Yes. Oh, I forgot. So the next step is to install the CLI. Oh, maybe I should do that with everyone. Oh, but then I have to open up my email and everyone has to see, and I really don't want people to see my email. Could everyone please set up the Bright CLI? So let me make this way bigger so you can see. So that's better, much bigger. Let's see how this looks there. Okay, so if we go back to my slides, I believe I had pictures of how to do this. So we go here. I'm just going to close the chat for a minute. And what we want to do, actually, I'll just do the slideshow from here. So we need to do the setup wizard. And so it says it takes 5 to 7 minutes. You can actually do it a lot faster if you want to, but we need to install the CLI on your machine and then set up a repeater. And so the first step is this. So you can do Docker, you can do npm, or if you're on Windows, you can do a Win installer. So I chose I chose Docker. And the reason I chose Docker is because my npm was really crappy. And I had to uninstall and reinstall all of it the first time I tried to use Bright because I had really messed with my npm. As part of an open source project I was working on called OWASP DevSlop. And so I'd made a giant mess. So we definitely want to follow these steps. You should have them on your screen. And so if you are using npm, then it would look like this. For the Windows installer, we previously had a bug, but it's fixed. So the Win installer should work perfectly now. So whatever they say for that one, it should be fine. But you might want to add sudo. You might want to add sudo to make sure that that's working. So I'm going to look in the chat and see how everyone's doing. A confirmation email did not go to spam. I will follow along in the meantime. Oh, Pierre. Yeah. Could you paste the links here? Yes. So you want to go there. You want to create an account. It works without sudo. Okay, I'll try it. Awesome. Thank you. Okay. So then you want to do the second step. And basically you copy this and you can just press the copy thing if you're using npm. And what you do is you paste both of these things into your terminal. So if you are doing Docker, just to be super, super clear, you have to turn on Docker first, and then you can run this in your terminal or your command prompt or whatever it is called on your machine. And so then ideally you would have this command to run it. And let me actually just copy this. Yeah. So then you'll see something like this, like starting the repeater has started, ideally. Okay, so I'm just going to exit out of the slides for a minute so I can show it to you on my machine. And so ideally you would want to have it look like this. And so my ID is part of my account. And so yours will be different. And this number, my repeater number, will be different. And so how are people doing? Are people doing okay? I kind of want to give you all like a minute or two to get through this. I'll just watch. Okay, the repeater started. Perfect. That's what we want to see, that the repeater started. So we've been going an hour now. And I was kind of thinking that this is a good time to pause if people want a health break, because some people have the repeater going and they're good, and some people need a little extra help. And so I was thinking I would mute myself for like a minute and I will take a health break, but I want to make sure everyone has the repeater started before we continue, because I don't want to leave a lot of people behind. So how is everyone doing? I feel like a lot of people have repeaters started. I'm going to start mine. And then we're going to see starting the repeater. Oh, good. Version 8.10.1 is running. Important, new repeater version is available. For update instructions, visit here. Yeah, I know. Awesome. Okay, connecting, running, I'm ready. Awesome. Okay, so most of the people have it going. And so I'm going to go on, but Akira can help you in the chat. And so if you want to not have everyone see your comments, that's cool. But so where you would type in the chat, above where you type, there's a thing that says to, and then it's probably set to everyone. So if you click the little down triangle next to it, you can click hosts and panelists, which is at the very top, or you can click Akira, which is 4 down or 3 down from top. So she's the 4th one. The the Bright webinar panelist, that's actually Ollie. And so he's on our team too. And so he also can help. So excellent. Sorry, it's not running. What is the command to run it again? Okay, so to get the command to run it again, go to your Bright account. So hopefully you are logged in now. And what you can do is you go to the question mark, repeater setup wizard. And so you can click this and it will run you through this again. And so you can say, oh, next. And then it gives you, did you install this? And you say continue and you bring to the next one. Oh, I don't want it to start the repeater. I already started the repeater. Stop. No. Okay, I pressed too many buttons. Now I'm in trouble. But basically, by pressing the question mark and going to the repeater setup wizard, you can get it to redo all of those steps for you. And so ideally, so you should have nothing here. You should have no scans because it's a fresh account. And we want to come over here to repeaters here on the left. And it'll say available repeaters. And hopefully it's going to show me something. Okay, so I can see that there is a default repeater and it says connected. And that's what we really, really want to see. If it doesn't say connected, you can probably do something so you can deactivate, but it will say connect for you. So in the Q&A, I have a question. I've previously had issues where I skipped the setup wizard. Is there a way to have the repeater setup wizard once I am logged into the account? So I already answered that. And the answer is you go to the question. So next to the little person image, you go to help, and it's the very first item because that happens a lot. Then the next question is how they can't DM to chat directly with me. And so you can do that in the chat. And someone else is asking, how long is the workshop? And the answer is, we will go to the end of this hour and then we'll stop. Although if people want to hang out for a bit, that's probably fine. I tend to just be open to playing around if everyone else wants to. Okay, so there's one last comment in the chat. Error connecting to AMQ server, cannot connect. Akira, can I leave you with that? Because I feel like you're doing a really great job here.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone has a repeater and it's connected, and everyone who doesn't is working with Ollie or Akira to get connected. And so now we are amazing. And so if we go back to the PowerPoint, so if we hit refresh, we should see connected. And that's the main thing. If you did everything right, it should look like this. So you should be able to go to scans and just see scans. Okay, so now we want to create a repeater. So if you're in scans, okay, it looks like your scan stopped. Yes, it did. Okay, so we want to create a repeater. So if we go on the left here to repeater, who here has a default repeater that is already connected? Who here is already set? And who needs help creating a repeater? So someone says, it's alive. Does anyone need help creating a repeater is set? I have the default, mine's connected. Okay, so everyone's awesome. Yay, everyone's awesome. Okay, perfect. All of you rock. So let's go back to scans and let's create a scan. Let's scan an API. This is what we wanted to do. Okay, so to do this, we click the plus on create a scan. So you can click the plus, you can click create scan, but you can see it gets a little darker, so that's the button. So let's get there. Okay, so now we're going to create a scan. So to create a scan, you name it whatever you want. So my awesome scan is what I'm going to name mine. And then, so we go down and we finish this section, then we go to here and we finish that section, then we go to here and we finish that section, and then we press start scan. So start scan is not lit up because we don't have enough stuff to scan. So there's more we have to do. So I'm mentioning that because I remember the first time I did this and I didn't have my big normal screen that I use because I have one of those 34-inch monitors. And I was like, what? So for project, we want to pick the default project. When you use this product all the time and you do lots of things, you'll have more than one project. You'll probably have a ton of projects, and that's okay. I have a feeling that I have cut out for a second. There we go. Now my internet is back. Okay, so we're going to choose the default project. So you just click here and you select default. And then the important part is when we get to scan template. Okay, so for the scan template, there's a bunch of scan templates that already exist. And so this is one that I made, Broken Crystals API scan. So totally ignore that because you won't have that. You'll only have the ones that are global. So there's an OWASP top 10 scan, there's a PCI compliance scan, a WordPress scan, there's, MITRE, there's the old OWASP top 10, there's the old MITRE, there's light scans, etc. But what we want here is API scan. And what it does is it gives you a set of default settings, so you don't really have to think and go through all of them and decide what you want. It's like, if you're going to scan an API, we think this is a good place to start. So you select that and then you click import the configuration for me. And what it does is it fills everything out for you except the target. So you save a lot of time. So we've clicked API scan. And if you wanted to undo it and you've decided you're like, that's no good, that's not what I want, you could undo it applying the scans, but I'm going to keep it. Okay, so now it's telling us some of the settings that it chose. And then we could schedule this to run, but we don't want to schedule. We want to run it now. We're feeling like we want to scan an API. We're not feeling like I want to scan an API later. I want to do it now. And so this is where you would schedule, and that's okay. There's a notice at the bottom. It says the scan settings include beta tests. We chose to include some beta tests in this because we keep adding, so like a new part of functionality that we've been adding is business logic tests. And business logic tests are a bit less common for a Dast. Usually we can just find bugs, which are code implementation issues. But what we've been trying to do for the past year and a half is add business logic issues, which are design flaws. And so most Dast scanners can't find those. And so we've been adding them one at a time and testing them a lot so that we could try to give more value with our Dast. But you can just ignore this for now. It's fine. So then we go up to the top and we go to target. So what are we going to scan, right? Where are we going to point our Dast? I'm just going to check in the chat. I have a warning saying some of the settings and targets are incorrect. Yes, you definitely should have that. And the reason is we haven't picked a target yet. My screen for creating a scan looks similar but different. There's no scan template for broken crystals. Oh, let me go back again. So in the details tab, under scan template, we want API scan. That's what we want. The broken crystal scan was one I made up and saved into my account. Okay, so let's go back to the target. Yeah, awesome, Tom. So Jose has a really good question, or Jose, sorry. What is the use of the local repeater? So the reason we have the repeater is because we want the tests from you to come from your machine and your IP address. So our product is a SaaS product, which means software as a service. That means our servers in AWS do all the heavy lifting. And we can do that because we're a SaaS product. Unfortunately, what we make is a dynamic scanner, and in some countries it's illegal to scan things without permission, and we do not want someone to use our product for evil. For obvious reasons, that would be really, really bad. We don't want criminals to use our product. And so when you're using the repeater, what it does is it sends the scan so it looks like it's coming from your IP address. So if you attack something you shouldn't, the authorities will be like, oh, it was that person, not it was Bright Security attacking those things. And this is super important because one, we just don't want our product to be used for evil. I don't know how else to say it. Lizzie asks, hey, are there any tips for working behind a proxy? I'm running Docker and I'm getting a connect error timeout. Oh, Ollie, would you be able to help Lizzie or Akira? Because I know that in our docs, there's something to help with if you're working behind a proxy and why you might be getting that timeout. Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, so all the things in the chat seem to be tucked away now, and I'm just going to check the Q&A. Perfect. Okay, we are good. So now we're in Target. In Target, what we want to do is say via an API schema for API endpoint. So we're scanning an API, and so we don't want to choose a website or a web app. And again, the next one is website or web app. What we want to choose is API schema. So we choose that, and then we choose the default repeater. Eventually, if you have 5 people on your team using this, you'll probably all have different repeaters. Like there'll be the Tanya repeater, the Akira repeater, the Ollie repeater, and then there'll probably be a repeater called like the absolute best repeater, because that is the type of sense of humor that I have. And so the default repeater, and then API settings. So we need to show it the API file that we found before. So remember over here in Broken Crystals, there was the JSON. So we went to brokencrystals.com, then we went to API schema, then we chose the API, Open API 3.0 JSON file, and that's this. So I'm gonna copy this link and I'm gonna put it in the chat so all of you can use it. And I'm gonna go back to the scanner and I'm gonna say link to a file. And so what it will do is it will go out and grab that file and import it. So I'm gonna paste it and click the import button. It's gonna do its thing, and I'm gonna check the chat while it does that. Anyone else on Windows getting Windows Defender blocking the Windows installer? Oh, Ivan. Oh, that did not occur to me. I'm not sure who's using Windows, but I have a feeling Ollie or Akira can help you. So you are not going to receive this message. File this already exists. What do you want to do? That's because I already imported this and I've already run the scan a bunch of times. You don't have to re-import it all the time. So I'm going to say update existing file. I feel like maybe I just have to update my repeater. So instructions are here. So let's go there. Installation instructions. So let's see how to update. So there's install, Docker, npm, Windows installer. Remember when I told everyone don't forget to use sudo? So sudo password. There we go. So it's doing things now. Things are going better. Hopefully it's going to work. Yes, you were having a permission denied error with the npm command. Yeah. So it's going to do its thing. But in the meantime, do other people have scans running? How is your scanning going? Yes. Awesome. So that is good. Scan is running. You have 18 mediums so far. Oh, that's awesome. Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so let's see how my command goes. Oh, good. Okay, so life is much better. And so let's try running my repeater again and see if it's starting. Ooh, look, I have the correct version. Yes. Yes, you are okay to run, Bart. What about the coverage exclusions with attack surface optimization? You can just leave it at that if you want to. And you don't have to wait for me. It's okay. You can start if you want to. Okay, so this is running. Let's see if my repeater is available. Life is going so much better. Okay, so now I'm going to pre-link to a file. I'm going to go and get the file. So API schema. It's going to open up here. I'm going to copy this, come back here, tell it, use this. And I'm like, okay, use this. Just a second. I'm going to import it because I can't see the button because I have the chat open. Sudo saves the day. Sudo always saves the day. You know what's funny? It's like sometimes bosses are like, you shouldn't just use sudo all the time because that's not a good example. And in prod, we shouldn't always use sudo. And I'm like, yeah, but it works. Okay, so I'm clicking my host. Yay, it's alive. Okay, so I'm going to leave everything as the default and keep the settings of our template. And then for tests, again, I'm going to, so we don't do the fuzzer anymore. The fuzzer doesn't exist anymore. So there's just Dast. Awesome. I see Akira is helping lots of people in the chat, and that's great. So I'm just going to let it have all of the things that we set it as a default. And so my details has a green checklist. My target has a green checklist. My tests have a green checklist. And so I'm going to click Start Scan. You are starting a scan without any authentication. Is that okay? Yes. So we're skipping the authentication because there's only so much time in our workshop. And quite frankly, my internet decided to cause me problems. Usually, if you're going to test an app, first you test it unauthenticated, so without logging in. And then after, you should test it so that it does log in. Scan status is pending. Is that okay? So Manuel, what you should do is click this refresh button. And when you click the refresh button, it should update. And yes, we want to run without authentication. How long does it take to run? It depends a little bit on your internet. So in my case, because the internet is not going that well, as you can see today. So I would say it could take half an hour, it could take an hour. It really depends. And it depends on if you just chose all the defaults like we did, or if you decide to add a bunch of extra things. And I am a person that always wants to add extra things. But I was thinking that we could look through some of the results we already found. Because even if you're not done, you can click on the scan and then you can see a bunch of vulnerabilities that the scanner found. Okay, so elapsed time. So this is a scan I did yesterday, and it took an hour and 18 minutes because basically I disconnected 47 times and Bright was like, what are you doing? That's not normally what people do. And so when we go into the scan results, like quite frankly, I just usually scroll down right to here and I click issues because I don't really care about the rest very much. Is the rest important? Yes. But what I really, really want to know is what are the vulnerabilities? Tell me all about them. So we have 25 unvalidated redirects. That's not good. Lindro asks, how much time do you have to scan in free accounts? I would say you get 5 free hours a month. But people who attended this workshop, I believe are going to give you unlimited hours for a month after the workshop. So tomorrow there's going to be an email that thanks you for coming, that sends you my slides, and then it's going to tell you, you can have it free for a month if you want and just scan as many times as you want. And what we're going to ask is that you scan things that are for work and tell us, I found stuff and it worked or it didn't work or whatever. And our hope is that you'll try this on something that you're actually working on and you'll find real value. That's usually the hope of most workshops, is we want to get you something good and helpful for your work so you know how to do new things. Okay, if your scan status is sent to pending, you want to hit this refresh button at the top, Nikki. So just hit this and usually you should be okay. If you're not okay, you want to come over and you want to see if your repeater is like mine, where it keeps disconnecting. So mine's just disconnecting all the time because my internet's very bad. Oh, nice, Ricky. Okay, so ideally, you will find a whole bunch of unvalidated redirects, full path disclosures, and then some low things. So let's talk about some of these results. An unvalidated redirect, running a Brave browser, things take longer. It's true. I am a huge fan of Brave. Okay, so if we click on these, like we have get, posts, and puts. So if we click on one of them, it tells us additional information. Oh, actually, let's go to the top. There we go. So number 59, so we have oh, thanks for coming. We have many, many, many different types of vulnerabilities we can report. There's a few hundred, I believe. And so this is number 59. And so status unresolved. What this means is if you retest it, this can change to fixed. So in the details, it says basically a description of what's wrong. So an unvalidated redirect basically means you took some input from the user and sent your web app to that new URL. And unfortunately, that means a user could be really bad and send you something malicious. And this is dangerous because it could be changed to something that's bad and send your users to a bad place. And so remedy, assume all input is malicious. So the idea is we would take their input and look at it against a list of ones that we already know are approved, like things that we know are good. And so if we're going to assume all this input is malicious, we want to test it. Well, we want to proceed with caution, to say the very least. And so we have like more information about why we rated it, as we rated it, etc., and different resources of different sites you could check to learn more. There's a bit more details, but basically it tells you where the thing happened, why we think you should do something else instead, and all sorts of other things. Like it goes on and on. We give you as much information as we can. But let's look at, so if we go back, I want to see some of the other things. So Siggy asks, how do you do this if you don't have a Swagger file? Can you do discovery? So I would say, Siggy, you really need to have the API definition file if you want to do a good job of testing. That said, if it's a web app that calls APIs, if you test the web app thoroughly, so you would want to put most of our tests on. So like the different templates will have some tests and not other tests, so you want to turn most of them on. When it tests the GUI and goes through the front end, it will find some of the bugs potentially in the API. But to do a really good job, you want to get a copy of the API definition file, sometimes called a Swagger file, sometimes called an API schema, sometimes called the open API definition file. Oh yes, you might need to use sudo too. Ricky, I have so many problems sometimes. Okay, so other things that we found in our issues are full path disclosures. So this means we showed the user the full path of where we're saving something. So why is this bad? Let's click on it. So let's choose a post. I mean, the reason this is bad is because we're giving them a bunch of information that they shouldn't have. Oh, Akira, thank you. Akira says, if you're having some strange errors, we looked into it on our end and changed a few things. Please try rerunning the command or scan that you are getting and tell me if you're still having an issue. Thanks, Akira. So if we look at this issue, full path disclosure vulnerabilities enable an attacker to see the path to the web root or file. This means they can figure out where stuff is on your web server. It is none of their business what is on your web server. You do not want to share this information. Certain vulnerabilities will require the attacker to get the full path to a file that they wish to view. For example, when using a load file query with an SQL injection to view page source. So detected root file is this. Detected system is Linux. And so they will go for the etc. password file. Siggy says, so to test to see if the Swagger file is complete, I should run a web app test. Actually, what you would do is upload it in our schema editor. And because we are so close to the end of 2 hours, I'm not sure if I'm going to have time to show you. Let me see. So if we go over here, we're going to create a scan. So if I just breeze through this very quickly. So you would not go this fast usually. Okay, come on, computer, we can do it. Yeah, I still have a timed out repeater. So let's see if it's going to do my thing for me. So I'm going to choose API, and I'm going to import the configuration. That's going to take a second. I'm going to come up here to targets, and then I'm going to choose API, choose repeater, default repeater. Oh, it's timed out, but that's fine. What we want to do is we would link to a file, and then we would open it with our API definition file thing. So let me just go over here. We're going to take this. I'm going to highlight it. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to link to a file. I'm going to import it. Okay, do I want to do this? I want to update the existing file. Great. Okay, so it's going to try to connect. Oh, it did connect. That's so good. Okay, so see this here? See this here, Siggy? So you would click open in Schema Editor. And now it's going to show you. So I'm going to say only show me problems. I only want to see problems. So we click there, and then it tells you all the things it wants you to change so that it's perfect. And it will walk you through, and it's very helpful. And if this workshop went a little smoother and I didn't have all these internet issues, I would love to walk you through these. But because we are running like really close to the end of the time, I want to see what it is with getting their issues and making sure that everyone has run a scan. So has everyone been able to run a scan and find issues? Like when I go to, I'm just going to move the, yes, awesome, Teresa. I can't find that API template part. Oh, do you mean this, Lewis? Let me show you. So I'm going to cancel out of here. So this is when you're in the create scan section. So we've created a scan, and we go to the target, and then we go down to the API settings, and whichever one of these ones you do, it doesn't matter, but you pick your file, and then when you upload it, over here there's this. Open the schema editor, and when you click that, it opens the schema editor and it starts showing you what's wrong. Oh, thank you, Peter. If your scan's still running, it doesn't matter. You can still see the results. So if you look at my scans, if a scan is running, it doesn't matter. You can still see the results now. So I'm choosing one from yesterday. So you can see basically like my past few scans really didn't work, and that's because my internet was having problems. So we click the broken crystal scan, or you click whatever scan you did. Ooh, Stephen has really good advice. But first, I'm going to finish this thought. So if you come here into your scan, even if your scan's not done, it's okay. And you scroll down, it'll tell you how many issues it found. And then when you come down here to scan info, you click on issues. And it tells you all the issues. And it'll just keep adding stuff to it as you continue. So Stephen's offering some pretty awesome advice. Siggy, if you're wanting to scan an API without a Swagger or Open API specification, I'd recommend looking at ways of generating a Swagger file from your API. I've come across some companies that can hook into your telemetry and then, sorry, it went off the screen, that can connect into your telemetry to discover the APIs, and they can export the JSON spec for you. Then you can scan. Or for scanning a website generally, you could probably use a web app scan just like you said. Great, thank you, good job, Stephen. That's awesome. Okay, we only have a few minutes left, and I want to respect everyone's time. So I'm going to show the last couple of slides while in the chat, Akira helps people who might be stuck. And then at the end, I'll still just help people that want help. So we just have a few more things. So there we go. So while we're waiting for results, there's lots of ways you can use a dynamic scanner. So you don't have to do it just like this. So other ways we can use a Dast. So we can schedule automated regular scanning. So you could scan all your APIs every night if you really wanted to, or you could scan them once a month. If you don't use them that often and you're not doing that many updates, the reason why you would scan them somewhat regularly is because we add new tests all the time. And so when something else comes out or something new is discovered by our security researchers, we add new tests, and that can be really helpful. You can also do one-off or manual scan. So whenever there's something brand new, like if I'm a dev and I'm creating something new and I'm not ready to show it to anyone else yet, and so it's just on my dev server or my local host, you can run a manual scan on that, fix those things before anyone else sees it. Okay, you can do penetration tests. So we actually have a couple of penetration testing companies that use Bright. And what they'll do is they'll just scan everything with Bright first, get everyone to fix those things, and then they'll send manual testers to find the couple of tiny little things that are left. And what this means is it can like reduce the price of your pen test by quite a bit. And then you have more time to fix those things, and then you can have a retest. And so I've been finding that it's a model that seems to be working really well for the few companies that we're working with so far. And we're a really young company, so we're still branching out, making more relationships all the time. You can put Bright into your CI/CD pipeline. So you could have it tested every single time you run your pipeline if you want to. And we have a bunch of ways that you can test things a lot faster than the way we're showing you here. So basically you would have special settings for each different app or each different API, and then you save it and it just automatically runs those same special tests every time. And so we have another workshop where we show you how to do this. Also, yes, so we talked about the results, some of the results, but not as many as I wanted to. So Steven's asking, can I trigger scans from a YAML pipeline? Yes, you absolutely can. You absolutely can. We have already, we have a GitHub action. And then, oh, is there documentation on how to add it to a CI? Yes, there absolutely is. And we have videos and workshops on it too. We should probably make a web page with a list of all of our different workshops and tutorials and stuff if we don't already have one. Oh, well, there we go. Thanks, Ollie. Okay, so what did we learn today? We learned APIs need just as much attention as web apps do. They're not suddenly like not needing security because they're behind a GUI. They're still accessible from the internet, and we need them to be safe. Scan your APIs with a dynamic scanner. It's important because other people on the internet are going to be scanning it, so you want to scan it first and fix the things you find. Using a dynamic scanner as part of your system development lifecycle will produce significantly more secure software. If you wait until after you've done all your stuff and you do a pen test once it's in production or right before production, that's a more expensive way to do security. If you can let your devs control the dynamic scanner and run it themselves, you can get a lot more value and just save money and time. There is a question in the chat. Is there any guidance on making sure the API spec is valid and clean for Brightsec to parse? You know what, Stephen? I don't know if we have a specific document about that. We probably should. I'm not sure. And yes, Peter, I'm talking about shifting security left. You got it. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few free resources. So if you want to take some screenshots, that's cool. We're going to send a link to a PDF. But my presentation slides go on forever, so it's 36 megs, so we can't email it to you, so it'll be a link. But resources, yay! So first, there is a PDF of the best practices at the beginning of this presentation. So if you go to newsletter.wehackpurple.com/API-security, you will get basically, you sign up for the We Hack Purple newsletter, and we will be geeky with you once a week. And then you get that PDF immediately emailed to you. There's a mini course in our community where we walk you through all of those best practices. And we're also going to send you a copy of this recording once we've cleaned up some of the errors due to internet issues. These are a bunch of awesome books, and I wrote one of them. But I'm a huge fan of DevOps, and the first four books are all about DevOps, like why we do DevOps, how to change our culture towards DevOps, the value and return on investment of DevOps. And then the last book, Alice and Bob Learn, Application Security. I have a podcast, which is supported and sponsored by Bright. So it's called the We Hack Purple podcast, and we are just going to talk AppSec. So our first season was about people that are new to InfoSec and all the different jobs. Our second season was just mini, tiny security lessons. And so that just ended, and then we are just about to start recording season 3. I'm actually recording the first episode tomorrow morning. Raymond has a great question. Why is it called Hack Purple? And so purple is a special security thing. So red teamers, people that attack resources, test their limits, and do offensive security, they are called red team. And people that do defenses, so people that fix bugs, people that secure things, people that patch things, they are called blue team. And because application security includes both attacking and defending, quite often people call it purple team work. So that's why it's called We Hack Purple, because it's all about the security of software. I encourage all of you to join us. So that's Bright people and We Hack Purple people all together in community.wehackpurple.com. We have free online on-demand courses about secure coding, Azure security, infrastructure as code, application security, all the things. All of it is free. And resources Bright. So you might want to take a screenshot of this because it's a lot, or just see it when we give you the slides later. But there's 3 different articles specifically about editing your API schema, how to configure your API schema nicely, how to scan API endpoints. There's lots of tips in there. And then every Monday on Twitter, I use a hashtag called Cyber Mentoring Monday. And every single Monday, I invite people to find professional mentors. And so if you want to follow this hashtag, you might meet someone amazing. And then lastly, me. I am a nerd on the internet. I have a blog, a YouTube channel, a newsletter, and so much more. So if you are interested in seeing more of this nerd, you have options. And with that, I want to say thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your time, for your attention, for your effort, and especially for your patience with my internet. And so now I want to see where everyone is at with your stuff. I want to see how everyone's doing and see if we can get anyone else connected that needs to be connected. Thank you. All of you are so fun. Thank you. Oh, awesome. I feel like everyone seems like they were able to run a scan. I see there's something in the Q&A. Let me just check that. Thank you so much for coming. You are all an utter pleasure. Oh, thank you, William. Shout out from South Africa. Oh, I went to South Africa in 2019 and it was absolutely amazing. And I drank that drink that the elephants made from the fruit that the elephants eat and then they get all drunk. I can't remember what it's called, ambrula or something, and it was delicious. I see what the elephants are interested in. Oh, and hello to everyone in Vancouver. Yes, amarula. It was delicious. Amarula cream. Oh my gosh, amazing. Hi, people in Poland. Hi, everyone all over the world. Yes, I totally enjoyed Ottawa. It's beautiful as always, and the food was incredible, and the people were even better. Thank you so much, everyone. I really, really appreciate all of you coming, and I appreciate your patience, and I appreciate you scanning all the things. So I know a lot of people are leaving, but I want to tell you one last sort of surprise. So we're going to send you some emails following this so that you can get a copy of the recording and all the other stuff. But we're also going to do a contest called the Bright Challenge. And so the Bright Challenge, and you'll receive an email about it, basically we want you to scan something other than broken crystals. So something from your work, something from an open source project, something that you have permission to scan that isn't broken crystals. And if you scan something and So I think we're going to tell you about it in 2 or 3 days. And so once the Bright Challenge starts, if you scan something other than broken crystals, specifically an API, we will send you a sticker package to say thank you because you did the Bright Challenge. And so watch your email for that so that you can get a whole ton of Bright and We Hack Purple stickers that are, to be quite frank, very silly. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you so much to Akira and Ollie. So you see me and you think, oh, she's so organized. She looks amazing. But actually, there's so many people at Bright that make me look smart. So there's Akira and Ollie, who you heard about. There's Admir, who set up a bunch of things. There's Nadim. There's all these people on our team that do really great work. And then I get to look awesome. So thank you to the entire team for their help. Are there any last questions that I can help with before we sign off today? All of you are so great. Thank you so much. And quite frankly, I have tons of stickers on my laptop, and a lot of them are Bright stickers. Yeah, GraphQL next time. That's a great idea, Peter. I'm going to write that down. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. All of you are so great.